I really appreciate what you're doing because edtech is hard
It's really hard.
and it's somewhat lonely. It's a small niche of the venture ecosystem. It's hard and just giving visibility to people and sharing examples so that people know it's possible. I think that's a very worthwhile mission.
I can tell that it's the long weekend because I've had to start over 3 podcasts today already, and I never usually start over one time, but I can tell that it's the weekend. But anyways, hey everyone, my name's Kyle Walgren, and this is the Business Education. Today, our guest is Luis Garza, the CEO and founder of Kinedu, a company that equips parents and caregivers with the tools and knowledge to foster early childhood learning and development. Luis, thank you for coming on the show.
I'm happy to be here, Kyle.
Luis, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us, what made you come up with Kinedu. What made you go that direction?
Sure. I've been working in education for 15 years. Before actually I was building Kinedu, I was building corporate sponsored childcare chains in Mexico, or actually one chain. Um, that was inspired by Bright Horizons in the US. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to school in the US, and I saw how the the accessibility for families to continue working was different than in Mexico. Mexico um, didn't have a lot of culture of supporting families, both parents working. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur and come back to Mexico. And I looked for projects around the US and Mexico and sort of how could I learn to start companies. And I ran into this guy who was starting the idea of early childhood centers, 0 to 3 year old kids in centers, but at the very base of the pyramid. So I offered him help. Basically, he said, I don't need anybody to work now. I need somebody to help me conceptualize it. We took 6 months. We started to work on this. Very quickly, I said it's not going to work because childcare is expensive as a service. It's you need a lot of teachers. You need to pay the teachers. You need to rent the centers. And so we figured that for the base of the pyramid, it wasn't going to work really well. So we started to build this Bright Horizons concept into Mexico and build it into Mexico and tropicalize it to the Mexican culture. One very small difference is that in Mexico, safety of kids is was paramount in 2010. Was the first thing before the learning program and the teacher training. It was all about, is my baby going to be safe? So that was a big feature of a program. Anyway, long story short, I did that for 6 years, and along the way, as I talked to parents, I recognized and realized that all parents, regardless of where we were in Mexico, in Colombia, Mexico City, Monterrey, they all had the same question. We are parents who commute 1 or 2 hours a day, work 8 to 10 hours a day. And when I get home, my time to spend with my baby is very small. I don't have a lot of minutes left in the day to be with my kid. And I want to make sure as a parent that I'm doing the right things for my child, that I'm playing with them in the right way. So they asked us, what can I do at home? How can I support their development at home? And that question really began the start of Kinedu. That was the inception of Kinedu. It was 2012 or 13, I think, when we started to think about it. Instagram and Facebook had just bought Instagram. They were public. It was all the rage. And so video was the medium at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so we said, well, let's do video content for our parents. And then we said, well, if we're doing video content for 1,000 parents, why not just put it online? And we're going to put it online. Why not build an app? And we're going to build an app. Why not do it in English, Spanish? And sort of that's really how Kinedu got started. So it really started as video tips for parents on how to play with their kids. And then it started to evolve into what it is today. So if you think about Kinedu, began with content creation, then it's all about parent data. How do we support parents to understand development as well, not just know what to do? And so we built out our milestone model. We made a partnership with a professor at Stanford University called Michael Frank, which accessed all our data in our app, repurposed it, and we rebuilt it into the app and then validated. So it was a huge 3-year project. 2019, we launched that. And after COVID came, we launched the initiative of really training parents to be better parents themselves. So what do I need to learn as a parent? So now we're solving 3 questions in one is, what do I need to do with my kid? How do I know that this is important and relevant at this time period? Number 3, what else do I need to know as a parent? So that's really what Kinedu is in a nutshell, is helping parents be better parents through play and through building their own skill set.
That's awesome. Did COVID help you grow faster, or did it slow your guys' growth down?
It slowed us down because we had made a strategic decision to expand into daycares. So we raised capital in 2019 to build a Kinedu for educators. And the premise was parents are the child's first educator and they are
I love
untrained.
that.
And if you think about educators in daycares, in the daycare industry, they have three similarities to parents. They have no time, they're undertrained, and they're under resourced. So we said, we're doing this with parents. Why don't we help educators as well? And unfortunately, we had built a lot of stuff, software team for that. COVID came and it really blew us out, like derailed the whole industry for childcare. Childcare's closed for 1 or 2 years. We
Mhm.
had no market. So we had to go back to the inception of Kinedu, which is parents. And that's been our focus so far.
It seems to me that you guys caught on to the importance of content early on in the conception of your guys' product. What kind of data points are you guys collecting on the content that you guys are providing for these parents?
So we have sort of macro data and micro data. So macro data for us is retention and conversion.
Mm-hmm.
Are people converting, which is a high value event for us after viewing data, and we sort of trail back which data are they using, are they seeing, and did they convert afterwards. And we have micro data. So we've been releasing master classes, and for master classes we look at completion of the master class, how much time they engage, very specific to the video content itself, because we have two types of content, which is activities for parents. The parents watch and then they play with their kids offline, and then the master classes. So one activity, which is the playtime activities, our focus is parents have to understand them fast and then go play with their kids. So the real event for us is what happens afterwards. Do they come back? Do they ask for more activities? So that's, we look at macro data there. But for master classes, it's very specific. It's master classes for the parent, so it's engagement of the parent. It's that would be more similar to any content app, like how many minutes are they watching, are they progressing through the program, are they coming back to view the same activity, etc.
So when you say convert, is this a subscription based platform? How do you guys? What's your guys' model?
That's exactly right. Our model, I have a tough time answering because we're testing the shit out of it right now. So
Mm-hmm.
we've basically, right now, we originally were a freemium model, completely freemium, where you have limited amounts of activities, limited amount of usage, and then you just convert. And we've started to iterate around the different models. If you think about platforms outside of, not related to Kinedu, you have a model which is would be like Netflix, which is you can't access anything unless you pay. You have Spotify, which is you can access everything if you watch ads, but they built up specific sort of nuisances that make you convert. You have Duolingo, which is sort of a freemium plus complete usage because you have a premium tier, which is a little bit more powerful than the simple tier. So all these models, we've mapped out 7 types of models, microtransactions, etc., and we've been testing them all year, and we'll continue to test them. Right now, our model is we have a soft paywall, but we have the app locked, so you
Okay.
can't really do anything right now. We're releasing a feature next month that is going to be free for parents to use. So we're going to move a little bit more hybrid into the Spotify type of model. I can't speak about the feature right now, but it's something that parents would maybe use all day and every day. So we want to get that for free to parents, make it relevant, and then get parents to latch on to our high value content.
When you started explaining this to me, Khan Academy first came to mind a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, there's a few things that I really admire. People that caught on to content early on, I feel like really have an advantage right now because, in my opinion, if you were to ask me the direction of the next major startups, it's going to be content related. I think we've got like social platforms figured out. And that kind of thing. So I think the next creative type content thing, big play is going to be in the content field for sure. So I'm interested to watch people that figured out content, 10, 15 years ago compared to the people that are now just, identifying how important content is on TikTok.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, like, give me an example of a piece of content that a parent would use? They come home, they log in. Uh, what would they be learning? You're talking about activities, but give us an example of what.
Yeah, sure. So I have a 1 year old, and I'll tell you exactly an activity that I saw this week. My
Mhm.
1 year old is 13 months or 14 months, learning to walk, standing by herself. So an activity for that would be, um, we set up different toys in different parts of the room, and the activity describes to us, how to set the toys, how to make it attractive, and then show us what behaviors we want the kids to show, what milestones we want them to try to develop or accomplish. And that activity is specifically about playtime corners, and specifically about helping my toddler now stand up and sit down by herself. So the idea is working on her balance, because she's learning to walk. She walks, with the big arms like that,
Mm-hmm.
but when she sits, she just like plumps on the
Wow.
floor. So
Yeah,
now you
God.
need her to sort of lower herself slowly, and that's what we're working on. So the activity describes that process. It's a minute and a half long, setting up the toys, showing an example of how this looks, and having an actor and a baby essentially do the activity on video. And then they say, well, now you do it with your baby. And so I set up toys around the room, and I walk with Lucia around the room, and that's one piece of content. That's a play activity. This can be when your baby is 3 months old, a very simple activities for like peekaboo based, or we try to get creative a little bit, but they can be really simple things when your baby is really young.
Mm-hmm.
But we have 2,000 of those. So
So
you,
typically, would you say that right now it's like early life skill type activities to really just come home and maybe shave some time off the growth cycle or the learning cycle to what parents are maybe missing out of because they're having to work full-time jobs?
it's skill based playtime essentially. So you're right. It's focused on skills, and there's two objectives of every activity: the specific skill or milestone we're working on, and the bond with the parent. It's the social emotional part of the activity. Every activity has that dual purpose, because if you're playing with your baby, you're working on your baby's social emotional skills, either way, whether you want it or not. But the focus on skills is focused around the four developmental areas, which is physical, cognitive, linguistic, and some are social emotional, specifically about social emotional. So there are some activities that are about singing, or singing a song, or if you have a small piano at home, doing your instruments. Um, Cognitive activities are about, there's a really interesting concept which I learned and it's in my mind, which is object permanence. Your baby doesn't understand before month 7 that things disappear when they disappear from their plane of view. So just try helping your baby understand that if you hide something, it does exist still. And having a box and putting the tissue in the box and putting it out, that also works object permanence, and that's a skill that your baby needs to accomplish. It's not necessarily about shaving time and accomplishing things faster.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very tiger mom type of mentality. We're not necessarily against it, because there are certain milestones that if your baby accomplishes before, they open up the developmental spectrum. If your baby sits up at 4 months versus 7 months, then yeah, at 4 months your baby's doing things with their hands and with their eyes different. But there are at certain times where your baby will never accomplish these things. If you stress these things, you're just stressing your baby out and preempting the natural developmental phases of the brain.
That makes sense. I'm a father of 4 kids, and with this one, all my kids I've always kind of just let them do their thing, kind of thing.
Mhm.
But with this one, for some reason, I just had a hankering to get him walking sooner. Don't know if it was the right decision because now all he does is run a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
But we've worked on that every day. You know what I mean? And he did walk. I want to say months and months before his brothers and sisters. But it was just something that maybe I wanted to see myself. If you spent more time on task, if you'd grow faster. The other thing that you mentioned a lot, and I'm hearing it a lot from the ed tech founders that I have conversations with, is social emotional learning.
Mhm.
Why do you feel like that's such an important aspect in today's society and how we teach our kids?
Oh boy, that's that's I could get political, philosophical in many dimensions, but I think in essence, social emotional is really about growing into the adults that we want to be, we need to be, or we are called to be in a society.
Mm-hmm.
Being respectable, learning to disagree respectfully, taking turns,
I like that.
all those things that you learn, or that you should show when you behave in the future or when you're older. Those are things that you really learn in the first 5 years of life, the basics, the foundations of that. um, there are things that are also softer, if you will, that are also essential. So tolerating frustration is really, it's resilience. It's another way to describe resilience. Is really important. So when we think about social emotional, one of the challenges I see while I was running daycares, and when I see with Kinedu parents, is we want to outsource it to somebody else. We get to school, your kid gets to third grade, and they start learning about math and language, etc. Um, then the school's all talking about social emotional, but social emotional is something that children need to learn from parents. You can't outsource that. Um, but I also think it's much less complicated than what the current trends and educators today are making it look like. Social emotional is about virtues, values, and behaviors. We try to make it into this sort of complex curriculum, and we talk about our feelings, and that's fine. But it's really, there's this phrase, children don't learn by what you say to them, but by what you show to them. They learn by example. So children learn social emotional through osmosis, really, through interacting with you, interacting with kids, interacting with other adults, and that's how they learn how to model behavior. I think that thing that's lacking right now is that the time we're spending with kids is less, or it's actually boxed into a specific role and not just a natural parent role. And we seem to be missing that component, and thus we seem to fill it. We want to fill it with social emotional curriculums, and that's not, in my opinion, going to solve the problem. The problem is getting kids to interact freely and be able to observe freely how adults behave in a natural way.
That's really interesting. It made me start thinking. I watch, we're obviously getting into a political season in the United States. There's an election that's going to take place. And the one thing that so I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. I moved to the US 7 years ago. So I watch from the outside. And the thing that I always found so interesting, at least over the last election cycle, was how emotional people get on the difference of opinion when it comes to politics.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe there was a generation, and this is just based off of the information you just gave me, maybe there was a generation where we missed the social and emotional learning? Because the people that I'm looking at now act very emotionally and do not know how to have conflict with integrity. It's like straight for the jugular anymore. You know what I mean? Like there's you can't disagree with something. It's just an all out verbal battle if you decide you don't want to agree with somebody when it comes to political structure in the United States. Is this social emotional thing just becoming on the forefront now? Are we just realizing something different that we didn't know before? What is it, do you think?
So you look like a well-adjusted human being, and I don't think, I would bet your parents never talk to you about social emotional learning.
Never,
right? But I'll give you a situation, or I'll paint to you a picture. So you have a kid who is given an iPad at 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, who interacts with the iPad. When the iPad is giving them what they want exactly when they want it. They have, and it's also sending them notifications. So they don't know how to wait. What they want is there. They want to watch a video, it's there. It's not like when you were younger, when you had to change the channel and see what was on Nickelodeon or MTV or whatever. That child keeps growing and spends a lot of time on the iPad and starts interacting with social media. And the only thing she sees are people being, people are being people on social media, meaner.
right?
They can't see their face. They can't really get any feedback on how their comment made the other person feel. They're not getting interaction with adults because their playtime, instead of being flag football or football outside, it's really playing Roblox on the application.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward that 10 years later, for me, it's no surprise that what we're seeing is exactly that. These kids never learn to interact between each other, feel like social media is a discourse they have to have offline. They never learn from adults how to behave. The first signal of feedback you give them, physical feedback, the face, they start to get anxious about how you're reacting because they haven't been exposed to many reactions of a counterpart. It's no surprise to me that that's happening. And I think it goes back to my point. No matter how much curriculum you want to teach them through an app, to teach social emotional, you need hours spent. You need interactions with adults, with kids. It's like going to the gym. You can watch every single video you want on lifting weights. You'll never build muscles unless you spend an hour a day in the gym for 5 hours 4 or 5 days a week. You have
Right.
to put in the time. Social emotional, you have to put in the time. It's the same thing, same concept.
That makes sense. That's really interesting, and I'm taking notes here because I have never really dove into this, but we film a lot of our podcasts on Fridays, and today I've literally had three different guests talk on social emotional. So it's something that obviously people are starting to recognize as something important that we need to implement into our children's lives. And the way that you explained it just made a lot of sense. What are some of the things that you guys are doing to keep content engaging on your platform?
Oh, that's a great question. So we iterate a lot on our content. We've, for example, our master classes, we're on masterclass number 5 or 6 right now, play. And so the first masterclass, we brought in a hotshot neuroscientist from Amherst University talking about sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last masterclass was the same with a big researcher on play, but we've had masterclass in between where we don't do a lot of production and we have the same success. And by production, I mean we have somebody who's not a celebrity or in the field or the great renowned expert. So our most popular classes are sing and sign class. It's teaching your baby sign language. Um, the person who runs this class has been teaching this class in Kinedu for a while, and we decided to create a master class for her. She's not an influencer with 100,000 followers. She's, a very successful and efficient educator. And so we've iterated around the concept of how we film, who we film with, what's the curriculum. The classes now are a little bit shorter in the TikTok generation. Anything that's over 2 minutes, people don't watch. So make the nuggets smaller. So we try to iterate on not just how to make it engaging in the sense of but really trying to understand what the audience is responding to. It's catering the medium to the audience, not the message to the medium in a way. That's one. The other thing, when we talk about content, we haven't talked about our content for acquisition campaigns and marketing and social media, but that evolves tremendously. Last year, we didn't run any UGC type of style ads. Those skits where the parent is acting about, my baby doesn't sleep. I don't know. I have no idea. Um, in this way, but we've evolved our marketing from being Kinedu talking to parents about how great we are to other parents talking to other parents about how great Kinedu is to parents acting skits and getting people entertained. So my fear is that content, um, how audiences react to content is very quickly being shaped by social media, and I'm always worried about our content staying behind. And so we have to really think about our content that we filmed 10 years ago. Do we need to re-edit it or not? And so we really have to be measuring the data of how users are reacting to it, both in the macro and in the micro KPIs.
That's very
But it's not
interesting.
an easy solution. On You asked me the question, how do we make it engaging? I wish I had a simple answer. I don't. It's a lot of work to
Yeah,
understand the user.
that makes sense. And when you tied it into like 10 years ago in the tech talk generation, that for sure makes sense. And we've got a social media team that's always trying to drive content. So trying to figure out the audience that you're talking to is a full-time job in itself. You said earlier, before we started talking on the podcast, that the majority of, or a big part of your customer base is in the US. Are
Yes.
you seeing a difference in use case between US and say Mexico, um, or maybe a difference in when they use it or how they use it? What kind of what are you seeing in differences and similarities between the two countries? Because I feel from a ethics standpoint or a the way that we all engage based off of our locations. Are you seeing a difference on that culture? That's the word I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
No, no,
There's
no.
such a major difference in culture between the U.S. and Mexico. Are you seeing a difference in how and why they use it?
Yes. So yes, and I'll explain. So you'll find this amusing. Our number two country is not Mexico, it's Brazil, which
Oh,
is intriguing for me as well. Um, so from the beginning, when we look at the U.S. parent versus, let's say, the Brazil parent, the U.S. parent is more interested in the why we're recommending something. How is my baby doing? Why do I like that sort of why things happen with their development? They want to understand sort of the root cause. Brazil, Latam, their parents are more about having fun, so they want to be recommended fun activities, etc. Um, And and the other thing we found in the US is that the US doesn't have a really great parental leave policy for after childbirth. And but we do have a lot of parents who are stay at home and use Kinedu sort of as their early sort of education curriculum in the first year or so.
That's interesting. Stay-at-home parents you're finding on the product. That's interesting. I would have thought totally different during this whole thing. I would have figured like maybe the divorced parent that's coming home with very little time to
Yeah.
use, but that's interesting. It's very
Yep.
interesting.
And it's
Um,
something we didn't expect, to be honest.
Say that again.
We didn't expect stay-at-home parents to be as engaged, but I think Kinedu is becoming a very big go-to place with a very large library of content. So when you have more time to browse through it, it becomes very relevant. And when you're a stay-at-home mom, I'm not saying moms or dads have a lot of time, but when your baby naps, you have some time to look around your phone. So that's what we're seeing. As on the counterpart, parents who work full time and got home at night, what we're seeing is they do nighttime planning for the next day essentially. So they view the activity at night, and then
That's
we
interesting.
think they play with their kids.
That's interesting. Um, Future plans for Kinedo. What do you see? How do you see it evolving over the next few years?
So I am really stuck on this educator issue. I still believe that educators are under supported, early
I
childhood
agree with you
daycare
100%.
educators. And the immediate short-term goal is making Kinedo a viable business, which is I don't want to depend on venture fundraising anymore. We want to make it profitable. We're close to being profitable, not unit economics profitable, but fully, company-wide profitable. And so once we get there, we'll start planning about our avenues to growth. But educators and how we help educators is going to be a big part of the future, I think. The second part, well, that's probably the second part. The first part is going to be just expanding past the US, Latam, Brazil. Um, Other languages, AI just made it so much easier to translate, to migrate to other languages, etc. So how do we think about big markets where we can apply the same Brazil strategy, where we have a small team that's working that quickly becomes our number two market? So markets that are 70 plus million people, Turkey, Middle East, Germany, some parts of Europe. So how do we think about that to scale Kinedu and really scale with the local? We could market to them now, but we wouldn't have that local component of understanding them and really market to their cultural needs versus just scaling and getting traffic. No, so I would think those two things. I don't think we need to do a lot more in the short term because those two are a handful and could really grow this company multiple times.
That's very good stuff. You talked earlier, or we talked offline earlier, but you've gone and been a part of both Stanford University and Harvard Business School, two of the most renowned schools in the United States. To me, those universities build networks that last a lifetime. How important has your network been in building this company and companies that you've been with in the past? And if you were to give some advice to the young entrepreneur that watch these shows, how would you tell them to utilize their network and start building a network today?
Yeah, and I've been very fortunate to be accepted. The acceptance rate at both is really, really low. And part of the reason why I build companies in Mexico is because I want more Mexicans to be able to have the opportunities I've had. And it's funny because right after school, then the networks were useless, essentially. When we were building in Mexico and trying to get into Mexico and starting to build Kinedo and finding a local team. But once we started thinking about, we need a research partnership at Stanford. Well, the network there was incredible for finding a researcher and getting a good partnership there. When you start thinking about venture capital, all my friends and dorm mates at Stanford, at Harvard Business School, who were in finance and could help me open doors. Um, it's funny because Harvard and Stanford have some sort of stigma, even in the venture world. Like, especially Harvard MBAs, we get a bad rep because some people are. You had 900 people per class. Some of them are going to be assholes.
Right.
It happens. So we get a bad rep. But I think overall, the people I've met through my experience there and post have been nothing but helpful, nothing but people who want to contribute. positively to society, um, and it's been great. I think once I started to get past the weeds of building a company locally and really thinking about how do you scale this and what are the transformational things you need to do, that's when the networks were really really valuable. And one of the things I want to point out, when we started the project of Bright of Advenue, which is a Bright Horizons, a childcare chain in Mexico, I reached out to three people randomly of the HBS network who were working in Bright Horizons. The three of them um, answered back. One of them was in Boston. We continued to talk to him. He became the CEO of Bright Horizons 10 years later. So
Oh, interesting.
that was amazing for us because now we know the CEO of Bright Horizons, and he helps us, and he talks to us and he mentors us. So that's been great. So my advice to people who have networks in there's something useful in every network. You just have to figure out, and also you can't know if you're going to get help if you don't ask for it. So I would just ask for it.
So many entrepreneurs think that asking for somebody for some advice or some, information is frowned upon, but I've never heard any one person on this show say that when reaching out or asking somebody for advice or a mentor or mentoring, or do they ever, very rarely, get the answer no. Obviously you can abuse that network. You need to respect the people's time, energy, and efforts, and they want to see that you're putting your best foot forward every time that they give you a piece of their time. But very rarely do I ever hear anybody say anything other than the people I reach out to enjoy helping, or something of that structure. So,
and I think it's been my experience that there's helpful approaches and non-helpful approaches. If somebody calls out and says, "Hey, can we have coffee?" and then they speak 30 minutes about their family, you're like, "What am I doing here? Like, what? How can I help?" So when people are very crisp, "Hey, I want your help on building tech in Latin America," how can everybody's, at least I'm very happy to talk to them.
Yeah, no, that's been my experience as well. We reached out to you cold. We told you what we'd like to do. Our mission is to grow a network for young entrepreneurs to have access to questions that keep us up at night, and by bringing on the people, and we focus on ed tech. That's our focus. So that's why I put these events on. And as you've seen, I was taking notes here myself, so I'm learning in real time. And this is like my guilty pleasure. I get to learn from people that have done things that interest me and answer questions that are keeping me up at night. So, Louis, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to following your journey and keeping us updated and having you back on. If somebody wanted to reach out, if they're looking to have a conversation with you, what's the best way to get a hold
So
of
they
you?
can, as you did, send me a LinkedIn. I'm very easy to locate. And also my email is luis@kinedu.com. So it's easy. It's a simple email. You won't miss it.
We'll put it
And
in
I just
the,
wanted to
we'll put
point
your
out,
profile in the description of the video too, just so it's easy for people to
yeah,
find.
I want to point out, I really appreciate what you're doing because edtech is hard
It's really hard.
and it's somewhat lonely. It's a small niche of the venture ecosystem. It's hard, and just giving visibility to people and sharing examples so that people know it's possible. I think that's a very worthwhile mission. So thank you, Kyle.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that, Louis. Louis, we look forward to getting this aired for you and continuing this relationship in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.